Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Careers in a Crunch. It's your host, Arti Chandarana, and today we're doing an interview with Professor Jhala, who works as an Associate Professor of Computer Science at North Carolina State University. I'm super excited to have him on my podcast and hear about his professional journey. Once again, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to our interview.
Thanks, Arti. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about my life as a professor uh, and how I got here.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited. So I guess we can just start. So, for starters, what does a typical day look like for you as a professor and researcher between teaching, mentoring students, and running projects?
Yeah, so a typical day, so there are different types of days. There are some teaching days in which I am working with whatever class I'm teaching. I teach at all levels of university education. So sometimes it's an undergraduate class, uh, which is like a sophomore level, and that's a different style of preparation that is necessary for that compared to a class that is at the PhD level where we have fewer students, but we go super in depth into a topic. A lot of times we are reading research papers in that class, whereas in the undergraduate class we might be reading book chapters or articles out in popular media and so on. So typically, as you mentioned, there's teaching, which is lecture portion, but also there's a lot of preparation that goes into preparing for the lecture, coming up with examples. Um, Oftentimes, at least at the college level, and especially sort of senior undergraduate and graduate levels, I have rarely repeated the same lecture. So it's usually whatever is going on currently is what matters rather than some textbook that that is very old. However, we do use fundamentals. So a lot of times we will refer to some of the fundamental concepts, but then say what is going on currently. And then in particular, my topic of AI and video games are both fields that have been moving forward very fast. So we have to keep up from a teaching perspective. Similar to teaching, there's the mentoring part. So some students do independent research projects at the undergraduate level. Almost all graduate students have some form of research that they're doing. And, uh, I might be primary advisor for a master's or PhD thesis topic, and there my students and I work pretty much day to day, as if someone would be working with a manager in an industry position. So the relationship is sort of almost like that, but it's sort of somewhere between, particularly for PhD students, because they work with you for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years sometimes, um, and you are kind of their primary academic mentor. So it's somewhere between being an industry manager and a parent. Uh, So, and then research days are sometimes it's reading new literature, sometimes it's thinking about a problem, looking for solutions, sometimes it's writing papers. Most of the times it's writing grant proposals so that we can fund our research. Um, and so that's a big portion that generally is hidden away because uh, funding is very competitive, especially in more popular fields. So out of 10 submitted proposals, maybe one gets funded, right? So there's a lot of effort that goes into um, preparing a proposal, coming up with an innovative idea, and convincing someone to give you some money, right? Some significant amount of money. And then there is administration that is involved. So we also have to do a lot of other kinds of work. One component of a professor's job is to do what is called service. And similar to how in high school you might do volunteering, right? So you have your volunteer hours. We don't really have hours that we track, but we have to show that we are um, contributing to peer review as experts for submitted journal articles, sometimes with peer review grants and proposals for agencies like the National Science Foundation or NIH. We also do a lot of other administration like peer reviews and mentorship of junior faculty members. Sometimes we work on reporting of various kinds of university things. We sit on committees to approve courses, new programs, and so on. So it's a huge sort of a massive um, menu of small tasks, but it all kind of gets clumped into professional service.
Yeah, that sounds like a super eventful and interesting day, between, like you said, being a professor and like mentoring and researching, all that sounds super eventful. Sort of a follow up to that is, of course, you said you're a professor and a teacher. So, how did you figure out what teaching style worked best for you, and was that a difficult process?
To be very honest, I haven't figured it out yet. Um, I think it's teaching and mentoring is it's like clapping. So, if I have my teaching style, that's only one piece, right? So there's a student, and if we don't properly align, there is no sound, right? And so sometimes I say to my students that I can teach you, I cannot make you learn. And so I go back and forth in my teaching style. I also change it depending on my topic. It was very hard to get even to where I am because my earliest experiences with teaching were not very good because I was trained as a scientist and engineer, and uh, in particular, sort of going through the Indian engineering education system, which is very heavily math and pure engineering based. There is no general education, no focus on communication, you know, writing, speaking. Like these are not things that you learn about at that level, right? So you kind of lose all of that in high school, and so after sort of lecturing, speaking at conferences about research, presenting work, clearly was a little bit tough. Initially, my students were not very happy. They said things like, "I spoke too fast." So now, if you notice in my speech, I have very carefully placed pauses. That's one of the things that comes out of years of practice in lecturing. But I also, with my graduate students or research students, we might just sit down and try to solve a problem together. A lot of times, I feel that where students learn the most is when I don't know how to the answer to something, and I am now working with them to solve it. Because rather than just me giving them an answer to something they're asked, they actually see the process by which I'm trying to find the answer. And that I think is more valuable. So I feel that a lot of recent emphasis has been on project-based learning and so on. And in some ways, it's mostly just something that naturally has sort of over the years my students have kind of pushed me towards, which is that if someone asks a question in class, I'm like, I don't know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you tomorrow during office hours. Let me, in front of this entire class, kind of find the answer, right? And then everyone sees how they all contribute to it. That's, I think, when that level of activity, on both sides makes it work. So right now, my style is, get a real problem, work through with students, show them how it's done, show them how you react and deal with failures, uh, and then also up, keep updated with a lot of feedback because at this point I have gone through four-ish generations of students, and so like Gen Alpha learns differently from Gen Z because of the way like I have an entire generation now that has learned math on Chromebooks, which is a strange thing because like three generations before, like they came with purely pen and paper. Now they don't know how to use pen and paper. And so it's been interesting transitions, and that you have to keep changing your teaching style based on tools and so on.
Yeah. I really like the analogy you said about the clapping. You know, you need to have both sides in order to have a successful sound. So yeah, I think that was a really interesting analogy. Yeah, moving on. So what first sparked your interest in computer science and how did you find your way into AI?
Yeah, so that was almost in some ways entirely by chance because I was super interested in in the medical school when I was in high school, and I was fully prepared to, I was thinking about neuroscience as something I would want to do. This was in the 90s. We knew even less than what we know about neuroscience, neurosurgery, and so on. In fact, my mom had to go to a specialist neurosurgeon, and it was kind of curious to see how they were different from other medical fields, how much we didn't know about the brain. So that was there, but I didn't get into a decent medical school. So um, the other thing that I ended up getting interested in at the time was that my cousin had and so computers were not that common in the late 80s, early 90s in India, and they were very expensive. Very few people had them. Um, but one of my cousins got one. It was an IBM Aptiva machine, and we played a lot of games on it. So I started playing games on that with my cousin. Um, and so I figured that, short of sort of neuroscience, it was that other field that I was interested in. So I kind of jumped into computer engineering at first. Um, and AI was actually much later. So in graduate school, I took actually game development. Was They were my PhD advisor had a couple of game development courses, and so as soon as I noticed that there were courses in game development, I jumped in and uh, and I took those courses, and I kind of got pulled into the games field. So video games was actually my first specialization in masters, except that my PhD advisor was thinking about how games tell stories. Uh, and that got me into how to intelligently get a computer to generate stories. And then that was my connection to AI, which eventually got me into that field.
Yeah, that's really amazing how, you found like your own passion and how that led you to your career. You sort of like, yeah, you went with like what you were most interested in. And I think that's something really important for a lot of high schoolers to hear.
I still put neurosurgeons in very high regard.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat jealous.
Um, so what skills do you think are most important for someone working in your specific field?
In my specific field, uh, at the undergraduate level, um, two things: a broad understanding of how computation works, which means how to do efficient computation, how to write good programs, good code, um, how to build systems that are resilient. If you look at other fields of engineering, like civil engineers will build bridges that will last for hundreds of years. Software engineers write code that gets updated every 5 days and breaks five things, right? So basic software engineering is probably the least resilient of all our engineering. It's the worst engineering we have been doing, and it's getting worse, right? Partly because of security and other things and all kinds of vulnerabilities, data breaches, and so on. So to me, that is the most important thing. Like if we can build some software that 100 years from now, without any updates, is still working, like that's engineering. That's like fundamental engineering tenet. Is that like that bell tower, was built so long ago. This is NC State's bell tower. Um, it's still standing. It's boldly there. Like I don't know, was the software written 10 years ago standing? No, not really. So I would say that is kind of the biggest thing going forward. It's getting worse because if AI is writing code, we don't know if AI is going to write resilient code. So that is something that a human will have to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good sort of skill, like you said, to have, make something, like you said, last, last instead of, getting it, being efficient and all that. I think that's really important. Um, so yeah, my next question is, what are some challenges you face in your job and how do you handle them?
Yeah, I think for with all the things I mentioned earlier that professors have to do, I think time management is the biggest challenge. Um, we are professors because we were passionate about our topic. We are passionate about teaching. Um, and we haven't managed to stretch time um, more than 24 hours in a day. Um, as we get older, we need more sleep. We need more physical activity to keep ourselves healthy. So there is a shrinking of time. At the same time, there is a need to do everything at 600%. Um, but you have to do it, right? So it's that balance. It's how to juggle between those.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge that, of course, not just people in your specific role as a professor face, but also I think like many other people, I know me myself, I definitely struggle with time management a little bit in school, but yeah, it's definitely challenging, but something that I think everybody could really
The
like.
thing is, it's okay. Yeah. I think you have to kind of be very clever about where to put how much effort. Sometimes an hour of effort is going to get you to 90%. Another 10 minutes is going to get you one more percent. Um, but you do want to get everything to 100%. So initially, you will have to forgive yourself a little bit if you are not able to go beyond 90. But then your goal is that over years of doing it, that your 1 hour will go to 92%, 94%. The more you learn, the better you get. If you can do that, great. That's when you get you successful.
Yeah, definitely. Moving into advice, if you could go back and give your high school self a piece of advice or more, um, what would you tell your past self?
That's a tough question. It was such a different time that it's hard to, different time, different culture, different restrictions, different freedoms. Um, but I would have liked to get a few extra points so that I could get into neuroscience or neurosurgery. that would have completely been a different life. That said, I'm doing just fine. So I would go back and tell my high school, uh, my fairly dejected high school self, that things will be fine if you stick to your basics and do a good job of whatever is given to you.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so I was pretty upset at that failure, and thinking back, it was the end of the world, and in the long term, it was just fine.
yeah, that's definitely important. Remembering that everything plays out for a reason. So yeah. Um, and what advice would you give to high school students who are still unsure about what they want to do?
I would say it's a lot of people find their way later in in their lives. Um, it's not the end of the world. It seems like it because we are programmed to say that like whatever your you know grade in ninth grade is your grade. That's going to destroy your entire career. Which you have to look at it from both perspectives. You got if you are failing, if you understand why, it's not because you are not good enough or that someone is better. It's because there is something else that is pulling you towards it. Um, and and so for me, I started learning music like in my 40s. I had not learned it. Now I'm like, okay, if I have the time, let me do it. And that was so hard, right? Learning new skills is going to be very, very hard. It gets harder and harder the more pressures that you get, right? I mean, if you take something like music, as a middle schooler, you were just kind of an element, you were just kind of having fun and playing the violin, like great. And then at high school level, you start competing, going into competitions, going to auditions, not getting into auditions, things like that. And then suddenly your relationship with the music changes, right? At first you were just having fun. Now you are like, no, I have to do this thing in a very specific way. And so that creativity switches into some sort of like organized, performance thing. Um, that is okay for certain things. You might want to do that, right? If you have a goal of say like I want to get into medical school, then you get all the lowest level skills. You want to be very good at biology, to be very good at chemistry, right? Whereas if you want to go into engineering, you want to be very good at math, very good at physics. um, AI, you want to be very good at programming. But there might be other things you are doing, and then in those things this 90% is fine because um, what is it, the saying, perfection is the enemy of uh, we are trained at the highest levels of performance to be at the top every single thing that we do. um, and if you can do that, that's great. If you cannot do that, then you pick your battles. For whatever career you want to do, make sure that any hard skill that you want in that career, you are very good at. Because like AI will, let's say AI and software engineering, right? Everyone says, okay, software engineers are going to be affected with AI because AI just writes code now. Except that someone who understands how to fix that code, where it's wrong, how to improve it. If you know it so well, you still have your job. You will be controlling AI, right? If you are using AI to write the code, then of course, then the company is going to just use AI. But if you understand the basics, then you will know where AI is going wrong, right? And so I think pure skill in anything is is not going to hurt you. Your foundations are, you just keep your foundation strong.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, like you said, with, allowing yourself, of course, to have, have the goal that you're looking for, but also allow yourself to branch out and be curious about other things. And when you want to be the best at something, you can really put in and know everything about that. And I think that's really encouraging and puts things into perspective for a lot of students like me. So, yeah, thank you so much. This was an incredible interview.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing reactions where people agree, disagree. It'll be good to also learn from this experience.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks and good luck with your podcast.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's it for this episode of Careers in a Crunch. If you found today's conversation helpful and informative, be sure to share it with a friend or family member so you never miss an interview. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.